and we can get started. So, okay, the background here, I think it's important, right? Every year comes around this time, and we have this incredibly impactful experience of Rosh HaShana, and then we have this very strange day after Rosh Hashanah called Tzom Gedalia. Tzom Gedalia is known as the fast of Gedalia. And it's mostly just sort of explained away, right, by most people, to be looked at as one of those fasts that we have that are part of the destruction of the temple. And so we commemorate that destruction with regard to fasting on this day, because it's the day that Gedalia was killed. Gedalia was really the last leader that was put into Judea by Nebuchadnezzar after he destroyed the Bet HaMikdash in 586 BCE. And in comes Gedalia ben Ahikam. He gets assassinated, and that's the last opportunity we have. If you look at the way Harambam describes it, he says, and I'll quote, he says, Shilishi b'Tishrei, on the 3rd of Tishrei, Shebo nehara Gedalia ben Ahikam. On that day, Gedalia ben Ahikam was killed. V'nichbat gahelet Yisrael hanish'ara v'sibeb lahatam galutan. Right? He says, and that was the last ember of Yisrael's independence, and it was extinguished. And that was the official sort of the official end of, or really the official expression of this first galut that we will put in by Bavel. And it was sort of like the stamp. Now, that's a nice story, and it's interesting, and I guess that does explain some things, but there's a lot more to it. And the purpose of today's class is to go through the story itself, have a sense of the history of it. Going through the story, we're going to understand not only why it's so important in general for us to appreciate this and to express it on that fast day, but it's also incredibly important as it relates to Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, as it relates to Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. And when we really understand the story of Gedalia ben Ahikam and the story surrounding it, we're going to have a much better sense of what our responsibility is during these 10 days and even before Rosh Hashanah, as human beings, as members of Klal Yisrael, trying to prepare ourselves for these awesome days. So without further ado, I'm going to share the screen. Let me just share the screen. And we're literally going to go through the story. Now, I'm going to give you some background before we start this, and then we're going to get into actually reading it, and we're going to discuss some of the elements of it. And hopefully by the end of this, everyone will have a perspective that they might not have had before or reviewed it if they have. So some background. The Beit HaMikdash is destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, destroys the Bet HaMikdash. Nebuzaradan, his head of his guard, is told by Nebuchadnezzar, look, we have this prophet Yirmiya, Jeremiah, right? Yirmiya was the prophet that's been prophesying all along that Bnei Israel, if they don't improve, the Bet HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar, he was in chains, Yirmiya, leaving Yisrael, and along with the rest of the people being put in Galut. And Nebuchadnezzar tells Nebuzaradan, let Yirmiya stay behind if he chooses to, or give him food and money and let him go wherever he wants. He's not an enemy of ours. Let him go free. And he gives him the option. Ultimately, he goes back. So Nebuchadnezzar at the same time he leaves behind in Judea, in Yehuda, He leaves behind a small remnant of people after exiling so many of the main elements of Jewry in Yisrael or in Yehuda. He gets rid of most of the people, but leaves behind the poor, the remnants that were left behind, and he decides to put this person Gedalia ben Ahikam ben Shaphan, right? Gedalia as the governor, as somebody who's going to act as the leader of the area, and he's going to be in charge, but he's ultimately going to report to the Babylonians. And there was another thing you just need to be aware of, is that the Kasdim that were pains they were thorns in the side of the Jewish people for many, many years, and they would always harass the Jews. In this particular case, Babylonians warned the Kasdim and said, look, you got to behave. We're giving Gedalia our support. So Gedalia is given this position. Now he's told. Now it's learned by the Jews that have already been exiled, and a lot of them hear about this Gedalia that was put in charge. They're encouraged by that, and they decided that they're going to come back into Judea, and they're going to join Gedalia and help be a part of this new development. Okay? Now, sounds like a very nice thing. Sounds like things are going well. And Gedalia tells them, "Oh, look, do not be afraid." As I'll read it out of the pasuk in the 40th perek of Yirmiya, and 9th pasuk, he says, "Al tir'u me'avoda kasdim shivu ba'aretz ve'avdut melech Bavel v'yitav lachem." Right? Don't be afraid. Stay here in the land. Serve the king of Bavel, because really I serve him, and it's going to be well with you. Right? That's what I've been promised. And hineni yoshev b'mitzpah la'amod lifnei hakasdim asher yavo elenu. Right? I'm going to stay in the mitzpah. The mitzpah is a machloket as to where it is. We think it's northwest Jerusalem, and it looks like, go and essentially gather wine, figs, and be prosperous in the area and develop, right? So it's all great, right? Now all these other Jews come down from other lands, Ammon, Edom, and they are coming to join Gedalia. I'm reading this very quickly. And they really were able to enjoy the produce that was there, and they gathered lots of quantities of it, so things were looking good. Now, Yochanan ben Kareach, among those people who came back, Yochanan ben Kareach, he was somebody who was a known soldier, a very well-known soldier. Yochanan ben Kareach, so they went to go visit Gedalia. They had some news to tell him. They told him, are you aware of the fact that the king Baalis, the king of Ammon, who is a threat to Judea and not a friend of Bavel, do you know that he sent Yishmael ben Netanyah, a man named Yishmael ben Netanyah, who, by the way, was Jewish and from the family of David HaMelech? He was a little bit upset that Gedalia, the Mefarshim say he was a little bit upset about Gedalia being given the position when he was closer to the Malchut. Nevertheless, Gedalia is being told by Yohanan and his crew that Yishmael ben Netanyah is going to come kill you. Right? He's going to come assassinate you. He didn't believe them. He didn't believe them. Now, Yochanan ben Kareach says, okay, maybe this is just for show in front of a lot of people. He doesn't want to. Gedalia doesn't want to react to that. So what does he do? Yochanan ben Kareach amar Gedalia baseter b'mispah lemor. Yochanan takes him over. He pulls him over to the side, and he says to them. He pulls him over to the side, and he says to him, "Listen. Elchana, let me go. Va'aket Yishmael ben Netanyah. V'ish lo yada." Right? He says, I'm going to go. I'll assassinate Yishmael ben Netanyah to avert a catastrophe of you being killed, and no one will know the better. No one will know the better. Lama yakecha nefesh v'nafotzu kol Yehuda nekbatzim elecha ve'avda she'elit Yehuda. Right? Why should you be killed? right? And then all of what's happening here will ultimately perish and go down in flames. ויאמר גדליה בן אחיקם אל יוחנן בן קרח, אל תעשה את הדבר הזה. Don't do this. Don't do such a thing. כי שקר אתה מדבר אל ישמעאל. It's a lie that what you're saying about Yishmael. It's just not true. I won't accept it. So in this particular part, we see that Gedaliah's response, and you can imagine, right? We know that the source of Tisha B'Av goes all the way back to the spies, right? To the spies of Moshe that go into Israel and come back and speak Lashon Hara, and Bnei Israel's response to that, and that whole experience of Lashon Hara is on Tisha B'Av, and they all end up ending up going into Eretz Israel. They die in the desert. It all goes back to that element. So you can imagine that you can still smell the Beit HaMikdash burning, and Gedalia is saying, "Now you're going to tell me Lashon Hara about this guy." So hold that in the back of your mind for now. I'm going to continue this story. Now it's on the seventh month, which is Tishrei, right? By Yishmael ben Netanyah comes Yishmael ben Netanyah be'Elishama mizerah hamelech. He was a descendant of the king, David HaMelech. V'Rabbeh HaMelech ועשרה אנשים איתו אל גדליה בן אחיקם במצפתה ויאכלו שם לחם יחדיו במצפה. I guess he essentially invited himself, or got himself invited to a meal, right? Which the Mefarshim say, right? The Bet Yosef brings it in his halacha that the meal happened on Rosh HaShana. So it's Rosh HaShana, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, which is Rosh HaShana, and he's having his Yom Tov meal at Gedaliah's house, right, along with his crew of 10 men. Vayakom Yishmael ben Netanyah va'aseret ha'anashim asher hayu ito. Yishmael ben Netanyah and his 10 men got up. Vayaku et Gedalia ben Ahikam ben Shaphan b'chere vayamet oto. And he got up and he killed Gedalia and Asher Evki ben Echba, who was this. The reason why it says that he kills Ahikam, because of the fact that the king of Babylon put him in charge of the land, is because, again, that's what bothered him, right? That's what he was frustrated by. He felt he should have been in charge. In any event, he goes and kills them. Not only does he kill them, kill Gedalia, kol haYehudim asher hayu ito, Gedalia b'mitzpah, v'takasdim asher nimtzuu sham, et anshe ha'milchama hikay Yishmael. All of the Jews that were with him, even the Kasdim that were there, the Kasdim soldiers that were there with him, everybody was killed. Right? Now, now it's Yom Tov, there's no telephone, there's no internet, there's no news, right? So he killed everybody inside of the palace, right? So there was nobody to go and tell anyone else what happened. Right now it's the second day after Gedalia was killed, which, by the way, is still Yom Tov. Right? ואיש לא ידע. ויבוא אנשים משכם, משילה, ומשומרון 80 איש, מגולחי זקן וקרועי בגדים ומתגודדים, ומנחה לבונה בידם להביא בית אדוני. What happens is 80 men that are coming from Shechem and Shomron and Shiloh, and they're coming and their garments are torn, and they look terrible, and they're essentially in mourning over the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, or actually some people say they're not even sure. We don't know if these people even know the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed yet. So there's a lot of different understanding of this pasuk. But either way, they were going down to bring a korban to a mincha to the Beit HaMikdash, right, or to what was left of the Beit HaMikdash. ויצא ישמעאל בן נתניה לקראתם מן המצפה, הולך הלוך ובוכה, ויהי כפגוש אותם ויאמר עליהם, בואו אל גדליה בן אחיקם. Yishmael now happens to see them. Right? They were on their way towards Yerushalayim. He sees them, and he meets up with them. And he says, "Why don't you come to Gedalia ben Ahikam?" Once he brought them inside of the mitzvah, Ishmael went and slaughtered all 80 people, and he threw their bodies into a big pit. But there were 10 men left who he didn't kill, and he said, "Don't kill us, Yishmael. They basically bribed him. He said, "We've got a lot of money, and we got a lot of food and good stuff stored, wheat, barley, oil, honey. And if you don't kill us, we could be helpful to you." So he leaves them alive. He takes them essentially as prisoners. והבור אשר השליך שם ישמעאל את כל פגרי הראשים, אשר היכה ביד גדליהו, הוא אשר עשה המלך עשה, בפני באשה המלך זאל אותו מלא ישמעאל בן נתניה החללים. It's telling us this is a very strange pasuk. It tells us that the pit that Ishmael threw all of these dead men that he killed, but what does it say? That he killed biyad, that were killed biyad Gedaliahu. Killed biyad Gedaliahu. Gedalia didn't kill anybody. So if you go and you look at the Gemara Masechet Niddah says, it says, murdered at the hands of Gedalia. Did Gedalia then murder them? Were they not all murdered by Ishmael? But because Gedalia should have taken into account the advice of Yohanan ben Kareach, and he did not, the Torah considers it as if he murdered them. Right? And continues the Gemara, by the way, which we're going to get back to. Rava says, Lashon hara, though you may not accept it, you must certainly take it seriously into consideration. Keep that in the back of your mind as well. Now, going back into the story. Vayesh b'Yishmael kol shrit ha'am, asher b'mitzpah. I'm going to move a little quick now because time is short. So I'm going to move a little quick. Now, he goes and he carries off the rest of the people who are the mitzvah. And and now Yohanan ben Kareach, and all of Yohanan ben Kareach, the guy who first told Gedalia about this potentiality happening and this likelihood of happening, he hears about this. Word gets back to him. He brings his men. He chases after Yishmael ben Netanyah to fight with him. He finds him at a great pool in Giv'on. When he saw the men coming, Yishmael ben Kareach, when the people who saw who was taken by Yishmael as a prisoner saw these people coming, they were excited. Yishmael ran away with a few people. He was able to escape, but Yohanan ben Kareach and his soldiers saved whoever was left over, those extra 10 people. He saved them, and he took them. Now, ויקח יוחנן בן קרח וכל שרי החיילים אשר איתו כל שליט העם אשר השיב מאת ישמעאל בן נתניה במזבח אחר עיקר גדליה בן אחיקם. גברים אנשי מלחמה ונשים וטף וסרסים אשר השיב בגבעון. Now, it seems like Yohanan ben Kareach takes on the leadership role, and he basically says, look, everybody's with me. He has to decide what he's going to do. Right? He's got to decide what. So he goes, they were thinking about going to Egypt. They're thinking in their minds, oh my gosh, the Babylonian leaders, the Nebuchadnezzar and his people are going to find out what happened to Gedalia, and it's just going to be the end of us. So they think maybe it's a good idea if we go down to Mitzrayim, maybe, right? Because they were afraid of Babel, they were afraid of the Kasdim who were there, who now had essentially we think they have free reign to go kill them. This is what they think. What do? But they go to who? They go to Yirmiya. I'm moving ahead here. ויאמרו על ירמיה הנביא, תפול נא תחילתנו לפניך והתפלל בעדנו אל אדוני אלוהיך בעד כל שליט הזאת, כי נשארנו מעט מהרבה כאשר עיניך רואות אותנו. Right? They told Yirmiya, who's of course he's a prophet and he's been able to communicate with God, and they said, you know what, we need guidance here, Yirmiya, and we want guidance from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? So he says, "Vayaged lanu Adonai et haderech asher nilcha ba ve'et hadavar asher na'aseh." And whatever, let God tell us whatever, where we should go and what we should do. Yirmiya responds to them, and he says, look, now you can imagine Yirmiya's frame of mind. He's been prophesying to the Jewish people for many, many years, and they haven't listened to a word he said. They lost the Beit HaMikdash, they're in Galut, and he has this group coming to him saying, we want you to go and prophesy on our behalf and find out what we should be doing. He tells them, okay, look, I'm going to do this, right? And I'll tell you exactly whatever God says, and I'm not going to withhold anything. So be aware of that. So they answered him, as God is our witness, they're basically saying, right? As God is our witness. We swear that we will do exactly as God says through you. Okay, great. ואם טוב ואם רע, בכל הדברים אשר אנחנו שולחים אותך אליו נשמע. Whether it's good, whether it's bad, whatever you tell us, we're going to be responsive to. Now, ויהי מקץ 10 ימים, so it goes Yirmiya and he goes to get Nevuah. It says, ויהי מקץ 10 ימים, ויהי דבר אדוני אל ירמיהו. Right? The Hachamim explain, ויהי מקץ 10 ימים doesn't mean after 10 days of Yirmiya's contemplating and meditating and talking to God. It's on the 10th day, the end of the 10th day. What's the end of the 10th day? The end of the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, Yom Kippur. So this is Yom Kippur. He gets the response back. He calls Yohanan ben Kareach and all of his people and says, I've got the message from God. Okay? This is what God says. אם שוב תשבו בארץ הזאת, ובניתי אתכם, ולא אהרוס ונתתי אתכם, ולא אתוש, כי ניחמתי על הרעה שעשיתי לכם. Great news. Stay here. The opportunity isn't over. Stay here. We're going to rebuild. You're going to plant. And I've changed my frame of perspective, so to speak, and on the evil that I've brought on you, and I'm ready to sort of rebuild. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the king of Bavel that you're afraid of. Don't be afraid. I'm here to save you and rescue you from his hands. And I'm going to bring you back, and I'm going to show you mercy and bring you to your own land. But he gives him the full response that God gave him. Yirmiya does to Yohanan and his people. We're not going to go here. We're going to go to Egypt, right? We won't see war over there. Nobody goes to war with Egypt. They're too far away. Right? We won't have to worry about the war sounds of the horn, and we won't have hunger over there because they have the Nile. It's all going to be great over there. If you say that, right? After hearing what I'm telling you, God says, the actual sword that you fear here and the famine that you fear here in Israel is going to follow you into Egypt. And that's where you'll die. Everybody's going to die there. Okay, great. So it sounds like, this is the good news. This is what God says. He has poured out his wrath and anger. And if you go back to Egypt, that's it. You're not coming back here. It's the last time you'll ever see this place. And he tells me, I'm testifying for you this day. You guys before told me, as God is my witness, good. As God is your witness, as God is my witness, I'm telling you, this is what he said. Okay. You sent me to him. What do you got to say? Right? I'm going to continue. Okay. He repeats what he says. Now, when he finished saying all of these things that God told him, ויאמר עזריה בן הושע ויוחנן בן קרח וכל האנשים הסדים אומרים את ירמיהו שקר אתה מדבר לא שלחך אדוני אלוהינו. You're a liar, Yirmiya. God did not say that to you, not to go up to Egypt. כי ברוך בן נריה מסית אותך בנו. It's your assistant, Baruch ben Neriah, who's inciting you against us because you guys had a falling out. He's purposely trying to mislead us. And that's, I'm going to stop there because we're coming to the end of the time. I want you to think about this. We had two situations that express the entire story of Gedalia ben Ahikam. The result, by the way, of this situation is they all go down to Mitzrayim. By the way, Yirmiya actually goes along with them because he wants to be with them. And everything that they were told that was going to happen to them in Eretz Mitzrayim happened to them. They were killed, they had famine, there was this horrible experience for them, and of course, they were all destroyed. So here, we have two stories. One talks about how Gedalia refused to accept the information that he receives, and he doesn't act on it, and Yishmael kills him. And then Yohanan Mekerach, who we think is our hero, he's our hero. He goes and he says, you know what? Whatever you say, Yirmiya, that God says, I'm in. You get the sense of a man of fervor, of a man of commitment and dedication. Yirmiya comes back with the information that he didn't want to hear. And the people didn't want to hear. They wanted to hear, go down to Mitzrayim. That's what made the most sense to them. That's what resonated to them. That's what they could only relate to. And when Yirmiya says to them, you're going to stay here and we're going to rebuild and it's going to be great and I'm going to save you from the king of Babel, you are a liar, Yirmiya. What is going on? So when we see these stories, two stories side by side, and this is really the end of those two stories, and we understand that the Chazal created this fast of Som Gedalia, right? And we're fasting because of Gedalia. It's important we understand the entire story. The entire story of Gedalia is meant to give us a sense of what the entire day of Rosh Hashanah and ultimately into Yom Kippur is all about. Rosh Hashanah is a day we call Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaDin. When we talk about Yom HaDin, we're talking about a day of judgment. When we think about judgment, Din, we think about something that is cutting edge, right? You do something and there's feedback. Din is feedback, immediate feedback. And what we're acknowledging, right, on the day Yom HaDin, and what we're experiencing on Rosh Hashanah is a desire for a relationship, right, that's so cutting edge, a relationship with God that is so cutting edge that we want feedback from Him. We want to experience the existence. We want to experience it in a way where there's real feedback. But be careful what you wish for. We wish for that feedback. Sometimes the feedback in our lives, and this year isn't a year that we can talk about this. I don't know what year we'll ever be able to talk about this. But this year, and so when you experience feedback in your lives, we are expected to respond to that feedback. And to the extent of our response to that feedback that we get in this world, whatever that feedback might be to you personally, to you as a community, to us as members of Am Yisrael as a whole, members of the human condition, doesn't matter. Our expectation is to be responsive to that feedback, whatever it might be. When we ignore the feedback, when we just dismiss the feedback, because the deen, this feedback / deen that I'm talking about, isn't what we want. It's not what we feel makes us comfortable. It's not what makes us all warm and cozy. The feedback forces us to respond to things in ways that we're not so comfortable responding. That's what Rosh Hashanah is all about, preparing us for. That's what Yom Kippur is meant for us, what we're meant to achieve in Yom Kippur. We're meant to achieve, we're ready to respond to anything. We're ready to be a part of this world, of your world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're ready to partner with you in this world in any way that we are supposed to. And we're going to be responsive to Him, regardless of what the responses need to be. We see in this story how difficult that is. How in the human nature of the human condition, it is extremely difficult to be able to achieve that level of commitment to the relationship that we're meant to have with God. And so that's what Som Gedalia is all about. Right after we finish this incredibly uplifting, beautiful experience of Rosh Hashanah, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, we go right into this fast. This fast of Som Gedalia is meant really to heighten our awareness and begin the rest of the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah in a way that really brings us to a Yom Kippur that's incredibly meaningful and incredibly impactful to us, and essentially brings us into this new year with that frame of mind so that we can all grow beyond our wildest dreams. And so I guess I will leave everyone with this short comment and a layman's beracha that really may this be the end of a year of kilala and tahel shana u'berchoteha, maybe a beginning of a year of only blessing with health and success and growth, constant growth to all of us. Be'ezrat Hashem, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the classes if you have an opportunity.
Thank you,
Jesse,
Jesse.
so much. Thank you.
Amen.
Great,
Thanks, Jess.
really great seeing everybody. I miss everyone.
You can't get rid of us, Jesse.
So good.
Yeah, the kids.